Welcome to Movie Talk. I'm your host, Michael Uhila. You know, films come in different genres. We have a crime genre, comedy, adventure. We also have documentary. And tonight, our special guest, filmmaker, documentarian, Laurence Brahm is with us tonight. Welcome to the show, Laurence Brahm.
Thank you, Michael. It's great to be here.
So, tell us a little bit about the history of your filming and just where'd you start as far as filming and how you transitioned into making films.
I started with the search for Shangri-La, and it's really interesting because I had a sort of major change in my life. I wasn't a filmmaker. I was a lawyer once upon a time. I was working advising these big multinational corporations.
These hours fillable?
No, these are not billable. That was my past,
okay.
my past life. It's been all reincarnation,
Okay, got you. Okay.
So,
Transition,
I was a
all right.
lawyer, and don't hold it against me, But I was working with these multinational corporations, and I realized that, these oil companies, chemical companies, pharmaceutical companies, and I saw that, working often with the CEOs, I saw management pushing stock prices up just so they could get bonuses and they could cash out their own.
More money. Yeah.
And it was this greed.
Pushing it, okay.
Yeah, pushing it. And one day I just woke up, I said, I can't do this anymore, ethically. As a matter of ethics, I don't want to be a lawyer for these companies.
Okay.
And I began to do my own search and put together a film crew. And we went out to the Tibetan Plateau, the Himalayas, searching for Shangri-La. And that was my first documentary. We just traveled everywhere across the Tibetan Plateau asking one single question: where is Shangri-La?
Yeah, so when you did that, can you talk a little bit about the process? Like a lot of times filmmakers, okay, there's research, we writing. So you talked about the epiphany and that transition. Was there any, like, did you go to the storyboard guy or did you go to
It was
the traditional way that
spontaneous.
movies make? Yeah.
I was having coffee with a very famous pop folk singer in China named Ai Jing. She's sort of the Joan Baez of China, and we were in a coffee shop, and I was saying, look, I'm going to go find Shangri-La, and I want to do a documentary and see whether we can find it. Where is it?
Okay.
And she said, this is the craziest idea you've ever had, but she said, I think it's the best thing. And the next day, she pulled some people together. Sambao, one of the greatest composers in China, he's a ethnic Mongolian, joined the team, did our music. We put together a film crew. And you want to know something? That film crew has been with me ever since. And we've gone looking for Shangri-La. We couldn't find it. We found out that Shangri-La is actually Shambhala. It's a misspelling of a very important concept, which is core to Tibetan Buddhism, the concept of Shambhala, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then we went on, and now we're filming the Lotus Born Master series. And it's been the same team with me ever since, exploring the Himalayas and searching for what can't be found.
So the first clip you have is on Searching for Shangri-La, which is the first film you made. So we have a clip, right? Are we ready to go with the clip? Okay. So let's see if you set this up where we have a clip of this Searching for Shangri-La, which is the first film. So if we ready to go, just let me know, and then after that we can. All right, so we'll go with the clip. There it is.
The notion of Shangri-La arouses our human yearning to explore the unknown. In finding a pathway across the treacherous mountain passes to the mythical realm of Shangri-La, one must seek access and traverse parallel universes through the digital codes embedded in secret mantra. Shangri-La is about defying illusion, living dreams, obtaining a surreal yet overarching understanding of a universe. There is no dispersion because there was no manifestation. There is no right and there is no wrong. There is order in chaos and chaos in order. The is not, and the not is. Shangri-La is the realm of bliss that we all seek to attain within the fragmented splinter of time that we call a lifetime. Can you find Shangri-La? Shambhala or Shangri-La cannot be found. It cannot be searched for. Shambhala can only be created. It can be done anytime, any moment, anywhere. That has no limitations. The search for Shambhala or Shangri-La starts with positive intention. Yes, your intention, not mine, not his, not hers, and not even Buddha's. It begins with each individual's intention. In the end, it will be our collective intention. So would you like to search for Shangri-La? Sure. Then start by creating it.
Okay, so if you just tuned in, we are here, and this is Movie Talk. Just tuned in, and you just saw a trailer from filmmaker Laurence Brahm, and that was Searching for Shangri-La. So tell us a little bit about that process. You finished that film, and then was there some going to film festivals, shaking hands with popular people, producers? How did it go?
The Shangri-La story is really interesting because what happened was we did a series of 3 films, Searching for Shangri-La. The second one was Conversations with Sacred Mountains, and the third was the Shambhala Sutra. And the sequence here is in the first film, we went looking for Shangri-La. We couldn't find it. We learned that Shangri-La was actually coined by someone named James Hilton, who in the 1920s wrote a book, Lost Horizon. James Hilton had never been to the Himalayas, much less Asia. All of his ideas were being taken from Joseph Rock's reports in National Geographic. That was National Geographic's very, very first correspondent in southwest China. And he was in Yunnan province on what was known as the Tea Caravan Trail. So our second film is we followed Joseph Rock's footprints to try and match what he wrote to the book Lost Horizons, and found out that Shangri-La is a misspelling of the word Shambhala, which is core in Tibetan Buddhism. And of course, the story of Shambhala is, you have 2,500 years after the nirvana of Shakyamuni, we're in the age of Kali, the time of destruction, where greed, anger, and short-sightedness have created all kinds of, diseases like we see now, coronavirus. You have, the rise and fall of markets. You have the rich getting richer, the poor getting poorer, the 1% of the 1% controlling all the capital, and you have enormous divisiveness, all driven by the 3 poisons of greed, short-sightedness, and anger, and all kinds of wars and stuff. And finally, the last king of Shambhala, the 25th in the line of 25 kings, each reigning for 100 years, sits back and says, I've had enough. And he sends his army of Shambhala warriors to use compassion to rid the world of this and bring about a new era, an age of Aquarius of Shambhala. He abolishes fossil fuels, regulates derivatives, and forgives all student debt. And you have a whole different matrix of a completely different world, which is where we have to go. And all this was kind of prophesized, and we went searching for it. So Shambhala is something we realized that you have to create. And that was a huge inspiration. So this series of films, later National Geographic.
Yeah, talk a little about the relationship you have with National Geographic, the process of how from one film to the other, or were you just doing the cinematography? Was there a storyboard? How did that work?
No storyboard. It was just following the sort of the journey. And finally, we actually got a hold of the Shambhala Sutra, which was written by the 6th Panchen Lama back in, going all the way back to the 1700s. And we found this sutra, which gives you coordinates of how to get to Shambhala. And it basically tells a story that I just explained about the king of Shambhala. And this inspired a whole movement of environmentalism in China, our films. And later, actually, I then stepped away from filmmaking for several years to become an advisor on environment, set up an NGO to do work on water conservancy. We did a lot of work on heritage preservation, community preservation in the mountains. We did work on medical, and it set forward a whole idea of compassionate capital or social enterprise, or what we call today impact investing. And then National Geographic gave us the Air and Water Conservation Award, and I became technically what we call a National Geographic Explorer, and then invited into the Explorers Club of New York. Not so much because we found Shangri-La, but because we talked about the idea of creating Shambhala through action on environment and preservation of culture, heritage, and identity.
So can you talk a little bit about the challenges of making that first film, Searching for Shangri-La? What were explain some of the challenges to the viewers out there here
Biggest
watching
challenge.
Movie Talk? Yeah.
People don't believe you. People saying, hey, this is not going to make money. This is a crazy idea. You know, we have to, documentary films don't make money. We don't want to invest in this. It was really hard to try and bring together support for the film. And then once we did it, distribution in the very beginning was very difficult. People were saying, this is a crazy idea. But it's crazy ideas that change the world. Later on, what you saw in the clip just now was our exhibition, because eventually National Geographic came in and asked us to do a multi-dimensional installation art exhibition with all the footage, photography, and everything, even sculptures that we created, which had a huge impact. It lasted for 3 months in Beijing, and one of the penultimate museums there, Three Shadows, which is the Museum for Cinematography and Film. And it changed people's outlook. It became a talking point. Finding Shangri-La is about creating a green environment, a place where we can all live together sustainably, and trying to respect each other. And this is something that we just need much more of in the world right now. And it set a whole course going.
And then you talk about the crew that you had. You mentioned earlier how some of the areas were challenging as far as carrying equipment, problems with lighting. Every filmmaker knows out there when you're doing films, it's like, damn, we got to wait till the sun goes up, or what the right angle. And so can you talk a little bit about that process of doing it?
The team at Shambhala Studio, because now as a result we formed Shambhala Studio. This team's been with me since 2002 when we began filming. And they're probably the most experienced team for high altitude, Tibetan Plateau, Himalayan filming. And a lot of it depends on, first of all, the team's very tough. A number of them are Everest climbers. They're not afraid of anything. They've taken bodies off of mountains. They've seen everything. And the other thing is they understand how to work together as a team. Working cohesively as a team is so important. If you have one person out of sync, everything's out of sync. And then using lighting, understanding the Tibetan Plateau, the lighting can become very sharp in the afternoons. In the morning, it's very beautiful. So you have to capture morning light, afternoon shadows. In the middle of the day, it's flat light. And so you have to change, you have to move with it, you have to be able to understand your environment.
Okay. So welcome to those that just tuned in. This is Movie Talk here with the filmmaker Laurence Brahm. We'd have another clip. Can you set this up? The second clip of the next film your next film expedition after Searching for Shangri-La. What was the second one was?
Searching for the Lotus Born Master.
Here it is.
Padmasambhava, Guru Rinpoche, the Lotus Born Master, the father of Vajrayana or Tibetan Buddhism, may very well have been the father of quantum physics. Following his handprints, footprints left across the Himalayas, scaling the mountains he crossed, rediscovering the sacred lakes where he performed magic, entering the secret caves where he engaged in tantric meditation. Our expedition teams proved the legend to be true. We tried to understand the meaning behind his 8 manifestations and the quantum energy fields that these represent. Vibrational code encryption embedded in secret mantra, quantum communication across parallel universes, the power of light frequency in altering matter, and the storing of knowledge in the universe. universal cloud. Throughout the journey, we sought out the wisdom of great lamas, the research of dedicated scholars, and the science of technology innovators in understanding how intention can convert negative forces into positive energy. The power of the mind is unlimited if we can just release it. But why can't we release it? Would you like to find out how? Join us on this journey searching for the Lotus Born Master.
Welcome back to Movie Talk. I'm your host, Michael Uhila, here with filmmaker Laurence Brahm. And what you just saw was...
Searching for the Lotus Born Master.
And talk a little bit about that film and
Well,
the beginning, or where you want to reference point though.
It began with a dream. I woke up one morning, I had a dream that Guru Padmasambhava, or Guru Rinpoche as he's called in Tibetan, the Lotus Born Master, appeared before me and said, my 8 manifestations are 8 quantum energy fields. Now go tell the world. And I woke up, and honestly, I knew about, of course, the Lotus Born Master is the father or the founding master of what we call Tibetan Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism. And I knew he had 8 manifestations, but I didn't know what they were. And I had heard of quantum physics, but I didn't know what it was. So we began researching this, and then we decided that we were going to follow his footprints, his life's journey from Pakistan through India, Nepal, Bhutan, across all the Tibetan regions, and try to understand each manifestation, where it took place, what it meant, and what is the quantum energy field behind it. And asking one question: is it possible that the founder of Tibetan Buddhism might also be the father of quantum physics?
So you did this extensive research, and through that process, you had the first film, Searching for Shangri-La, and then Searching for the Lotus Born Master. At what point in between those films how was the transition? Because you know how sometimes filmmakers talk about, I saw this interview where Stanley Kubrick was like, after we finished this movie, then we had to do, it was after The Shining, then I had to do Full Metal Jacket, totally different movie. How does that work with the transition from, you're traveling a lot, jet lag, there's all these, so talk a little bit about that transition between one film to the other.
Well, I think the transition from Shangri-La to Searching for Shangri-La and the Shambhala series to the Lotus Born Master had a deep connection. In between, there were many years in which I worked in, community activity, environmental
You had a little bit
work.
more black hair in the first one, right?
That's right.
So I saw that a little bit transition. There was some difference.
So a number of years went by in which I wasn't making films. I was actually in the field doing environmental work. And then we had this idea, because of the dream, we brought a whole film team back, and we began again. And it was the idea of searching. It was the idea of a journey. It's an exploration. Because whatever you're doing, if you're doing it in Tibetan practice, Buddhist practice, you're always entering into an exploration of both yourself and the universe. And so, in a way, the journey of searching for the Lotus Born Master reconnected us back to the concept of Shambhala, because actually, in the end, what he heralds in is the era of Shambhala. He returns once again as the Lotus, king, the king of Shambhala.
Okay,
and so,
that's the next clip, right?
And
Let's
that's the next clip, the Return of the Lotus Born Master.
Return of the Lotus Born Master. Let's take a look
sequel.
at that. It's the sequel. This is Movie Talk with Michael Uhila and Laurence Brahm. So let's take a look at that clip. Return.
There was a prophecy. He will return. It will happen in the age of Kali, the era of degeneration and social chaos, when greed, short-sightedness, and anger possess mankind. When everything falls apart and the people lose hope, he will return. They said that he will come from the west.
there is a cave with a hidden sword, the Excalibur of the Himalayas. The prophecy says, whoever finds the sword will be him, Guru Padmasambhava, the Lotus Born Master, the Lotus King, entrusted to herald a new era of Kamala from his palace of Zanjwa Paltri, and lead the armies of Shambhala in liberating our planet from the samsara of greed, anger, and ignorance. There are secret teachings in hidden valleys, guarded by the Dakini, or Skywalkers, feminine energy spirits that know no limit of time or space. They have left encrypted messages that can only be deciphered by the enlightened ones who have the access codes to multidimensional realms. Only they can download these teachings from the universal cloud. Join us on this journey in search of the Lotus Born Master's secret teachings as we seek wisdom from great lamas, research of dedicated scholars, and science from technology innovators and quantum physicists. Join us on this unprecedented expedition, following footprints of the Dakini to enter hidden realms that unlock parallel, multidimensional universes where our world's knowledge is stored beyond time and space in the hard drive of the quantum hologram. Step through the looking glass to log on to the matrix of your mind, the circuit board that will lead us to a future called Shambhala as never seen before.
And welcome back to Movie Talk. I'm your host, Michael Uhila, here with filmmaker Laurence Brahm. And what you just saw was
Return of the Lotus Born Master,
Master. So,
decrypting the Dakini code.
okay, we talk a little bit about that. That's
Well,
the film.
in our first of the Lotus Master series, we looked at the 8 manifestations of the Lotus Born Master's 8 quantum energy fields. And his last manifestation, he appears in Bhutan as Dorje Drolo, and he stores his knowledge and teachings in the universal cloud for us to download later and to realize what we need to do in the age of destruction, the age of Kali, which we're in now, so that we can herald the era of Shambhala and have a more collective, unified, harmonious world to live in. And so the question we had was, how do you store knowledge in the universal cloud? And we went to Bhutan and we said, look, is it possible that quantum physics even began in Bhutan? I mean, let's go there and let's try to understand how information can be stored in nature, in the sky, in space, and unlock the encrypted codes, the Dakini script, that actually will help us to enter into the quantum hologram, that field where all knowledge and wisdom is stored. Some people call it the Akashic Records, and explore that. And we went all across Bhutan, and the film is technically now a Bhutanese film. It's actually been licensed in Bhutan, and it's going to be in the theaters of Bhutan in just a month, and we'll be at the 2020 Vajrayana Conference, which is the national conference on Vajrayana Buddhism that's convened in Bhutan every year by the Prime Minister, and look at the direction of how we can create a better world by applying these principles.
Okay, so we have a few minutes left. Can you talk a little bit about what's next for Laurence Brahm and what's his next project and what to look forward to?
The third sequel, which we're filming right now, is going to be called the Dakini Code. And we're looking at the 5 wisdom consorts, that feminine energy fields, the yin of the yang, that Guru Padmasambhava, that the Lotus Born Master was able to bring into his energy field to be able to create a better world. We're looking really at what's behind gender empowerment, that energy, that nurturing energy, which is actually a field of its own in quantum physics. What is it? Is it the Higgs boson? Is it the ultimately dark matter? Is it the black hole? Is it the event horizon around the black hole where all information is stored? And we're working with quantum physicists as well as lamas to try and decode that encryption to be able to log on to the matrix of what is the universal hologram. And that's our third documentary in the series before we start our feature film, which is going to be an action film today, bringing all of these ideas into the current time.
Just you got the bridging of science and spirituality. You have now you're going into not documentary style, but more narrative, a film that has script and
we're going to create a whole feature film story.
Feature
and it's
film,
take
okay.
place right here in Silicon
Valley here, right here.
You know, I'm so glad you have me on this program here, you know, speaking live to Silicon Valley.
Yes.
Because
there they are.
I realize, you know, aside from the Buddhist community and what I call the informed community that has a background in the history and culture and spirituality, the people who resonate with our films the most are the technology crowd.
Yes.
Because it's taking traditional philosophies that had an understanding of the universal hologram, of the matrix, and it's connecting it with quantum physics and explaining quantum physics. All the technology we have today, just a model.
Thanks Laurence Brahm, our filmmaker here tonight. I also want to thank Joe on camera, Lou the director, Mana, Blair Helu, Pedro, Nance Wheeler, Dr. Tanaka. What is your son's name?
And Robert Brahm.
Yeah, Robert, okay.
Yeah.
So I want to thank all of the people for tuning in here to Movie Talk. I really appreciate your time. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Thanks.
Supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be here. I'm looking for actors. I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be here. I'm looking for actors for Master.